His entry has made an exceptional individual contribution, grounded in rigorous empirical research. The finalist's Trojan horse approach, implicit in his growing the pie concept, is both creative and impressive. He has successfully communicated his thinking widely and effectively, bringing sustainable finance into leading finance textbooks and mainstream finance education. I'm delighted to announce that the winner is Alex Edmans.
So I started first working in sustainable finance in 2006, so that was the final year of my PhD at MIT. And back in 2006, nobody really cared about sustainable finance, so it was a really niche topic. So I didn't work on this topic because there was demand for it. It's not something that would have got me into the Wall Street Journal or the Financial Times, but I did that because intrinsically it's something I cared about. So I cared about whether companies that treat their workers ethically will do better in the long term. So I wrote that study. It was really difficult to get it published because people were very skeptical about sustainable finance. But because of that, I had to jump through so many hurdles. I had to rule out all of the other alternative explanations, and that made the paper much stronger. So now when I present on these issues to more skeptical audiences, even if they come to this topic with some skepticism, due to the robustness of the data, they might end up being convinced. So I studied economics and management at Oxford University, and why did I choose that subject? It's because it's a mixture of arts and sciences. So on the one hand, you do have some economic theory, so it's not purely subjective, but then those theories are not completely set in stone. You can have different opinions. So reasonable people can look at the same data, and I might think taxes should be higher, and you might think taxes should be lower, and I do enjoy that ability to exchange different viewpoints. So there's a lot of people who work on sustainable finance right now, and I respect a lot of what they do. But most of the work that I see is based on the moral and ethical case for responsible business. So do it because it's the right thing to do, and in some approaches they might be guilt-tripping investors or managers to take these things into account. And I think that might be limited for two reasons. First is if it's based on the moral and ethical case, different people have different morals and ethics. So on the one hand, you might have some people who say we absolutely need to decarbonise because climate change is the greatest threat, but there's other people who might care about employee welfare, and they might be concerned that shutting down a lot of coal-fired power stations might make a lot of people redundant and lead to a lot of loss of welfare in that way. And the second reason why you can't just rely on a moral and ethical case is that when the rubber hits the road, companies aren't charities. Companies do need to make profits to survive, and they need to do this so that they can give a return to their investors, who might be pension funds, they might be you and I, saving for our children's retirement. So what I focus on in my work is the business and financial case. Yes, the moral and ethical case is still really important. I'm not dismissing that. Instead, I'm trying to supplement this by arguing you should be a company that takes sustainability seriously because it's the right thing to do, but also because it's good business. And I think some of the most gratifying reactions that I've had to my work have been from maybe hard-headed businessmen and businesswomen who might not naturally be more accommodating towards sustainability, but when they realise that there is data and evidence behind it, rather than just guilt-tripping or moral arguments, then they realise it's something that they should embrace and take seriously. So what is the pie-growing mentality? So let me explain what the pie is. So often we think that the value that a company creates is given by a pie, and that pie can be split to investors in the form of profits, or society in the form of fair wages to workers, taxes to the government, or fair prices to customers. And often we think that a sustainable business is one that splits the pie more fairly. So it sacrifices profits by paying workers more than it needs to. It might charge customers less than they can get away with. And absolutely, fairness and equality is part of sustainability, but my work is trying to argue that it's not just the division of the pie that matters, but the size of the pie. So what's really important is for companies to actively create value. And notice, importantly, the size of the pie is not wealth, it's not profits. I'm not about trickle-down economics here. The size of the pie is the social value that a company creates. So what is the best way, perhaps, to treat your workers better? Not purely through paying them more, that is important, but the other things that we can do are providing them with meaningful work and skills development, mentorship, coaching, a corporate culture which allows them to be themselves at work and contribute to dissenting ideas. And why is that so powerful? Because not only does it make employees happier and more fulfilled, but it also makes them more productive, and therefore it makes the company more profitable in the long term. So that's why the pie grows, both investors and employees become better off. And so that's why I speak about a business case for sustainability. These things are good for your employees, but they're also good for the long-term profitability of your business. The aspect of my research that has made me most proud is its reception from companies who you might think would be sceptical about purpose. So these might include, say, investment banks, private equity, hedge funds, law firms, companies which do live in cutthroat environments where you might think the historic culture is to focus on short-term profit rather than wider society. And so what's really gratifying is that some people who've worked in these organisations, even led these organisations, have said, we were really sceptical about this idea of purpose and responsibility, but when we read your book or we listened to your talks, we realised that it wasn't just some nice stories behind it, it was some data and also recognition of trade-offs and commercial pressures rather than just this unrealistic idea that we should just ignore profits and just think about stakeholder value. And so I think it's really important to be able not just to speak to the converted, but also to speak to more mainstream companies, because if we are going to change society for the better, it doesn't just require this to be something that chief sustainability officers care about, but chief executive officers and chief financial officers and the investment management industry needs to know that this is something which is mainstream. I'm trying to make sustainability mainstream by making it part of the core finance textbook. So I'm really pleased that the reception that my book Grow the Pie has had, but if you need to read Grow the Pie to learn about this, then I've lost. Why? Because that's something which is ostensibly a sustainable finance book, and only people with a certain mindset would be willing to read a sustainable finance book. So I'm really proud to now be the co-author of Principles of Corporate Finance by Brealey, Myers, Allen and Anami Alex Edmans. That is the book which has been seen as the Bible of finance for the last 40 years. So when I was at Oxford, this is what we read to learn finance. When I started at Morgan Stanley, all analysts had it, we all had it on our shelves. And so now as a co-author, what I've tried to do is to make sustainability an important part of the book. So not only is there a special chapter on responsible business, but right from chapter 1, we've highlighted the importance of sustainability. So there's 5 principles of finance we introduced in chapter 1, which then are principles that span the entire book. And I've rewritten the second principle to highlight that maximising value involves taking seriously a company's impact on employees, customers, suppliers, communities, wider society, and so forth, to show that this is not just a topic for sustainability professionals, but any finance professional needs to make sure that he or she is really well versed in it.